Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 330, cover dated March 1996. And the cover is by Joe Madureira, inked by Tim Townsend. And it features Gomar the Ancient, Archangel and Wolverine there, but they're dressed in samurai garb and using Asian martial arts weapons. In particular, what's noteworthy is the fact that Archangel is using these particular blades. I don't know the name of these weapons instead of his wings. And also we've got Wolverine there in the forefront about to draw a samurai type sword. So it's a nice image, well composed. I like the flow of the figures from left to right and back down, looping into the left hand corner. And also what I like is the different colors that they have on their clothing, blue to red to green as well. And the decision to have a white background for the whole cover makes the figures pop in particular. So a nicely designed cover definitely would stand out from the comics racks. And this is part 2 of a 2-part story, Quest for the Crimson Dawn. Let's open this one up to the first page. So we have a splash anchor image here, nice top-down shot on Archangel and Wolverine, and they've already gotten into their traditional garb for the quest that they have entered on. Just one feature of the traditional garb that's a little bit weird is this string vest that Wolverine is wearing. It's an odd choice. I don't know what the, what would I say, like defensive value of a string vest is. Yeah, pretty weird. But what happens is that they are making their way into a world they barely understand, and this is why they've had to get into the traditional garb, because it is a place that the locals consider sacred, very sacred, says Gomar as he smiles there, opens a door. He says, but much patience is required, I'm having some work done. And then it turns out it's basically his warehouse. So that's a nice shot of the trio there with backlighting. So most of the front of their figures in silhouette, really nicely done. And nice details inside in this warehouse space, including a little Easter egg up here, which is Sunfire's mask from Age of Apocalypse. So of course that character, the redesign of the character by Joe Madureira, and he's working in that little mask for Sunfire into the background of this warehouse. And then we've got all of these dragon faces here as well, and scrolls and so on and so forth. So we get a little bit of explanation of what's going on, like the backstory to everything. Psylocke is on the verge of dying on account of injuries sustained from a fight with Sabretooth in Uncanny X-Men 328. And Warren and Logan are on a quest in order to find a mystical remedy for her injuries. Now, while they're here in the warehouse, these shadow ninjas emerge from the floor and indeed from the shadows, but they're interrupted, and I like the drawing of how they just kind of melt back into the shadows on the floor when Doctor Strange in his astral form materializes, because Doctor Strange has decided to accompany Wolverine and Archangel on their quest. And Wolverine's not happy about it. He says, Doctor Strange, for a minute there I thought the master of mystic arts was going to leave us to trek to the Ebon vein on our lonesome. And Doctor Strange responds, that would be ill-advised. I'm late because I was checking on Elizabeth Braddock's deteriorating condition in my astral form. So this catches Warren unexpectedly. He's in love with Psylocke, and of course he's perturbed. And Doctor Strange says, I'm sorry, Archangel, she's not long for this world. So the stakes are high. They've got to get going on this quest and find a remedy for what ails Psylocke. So what happens here is that Wolverine extrudes his bone claws, and there's a special sound effect for that, schlicked rather than snicked. And then he seems to slash through Doctor Strange, which of course is a shock for readers and a nice little cliffhanger on the bottom of this page. But also, I felt the first time I was rereading this in preparation for the video, I feel there's a bit of a tangent there. And initially I thought with the slash sound effect that Wolverine had cut off the front of Stephen Strange's costume. But in fact, no, that's not what's happened. It's just that tangent was a little off-putting the first time I looked at the panel. So what is he slashing at with his bone claws? Well, it's the Shadow Ninjas. And we learn that they have a specific name. They're called Undercloaks. So Gomer explains they never act alone. They always act in groups. And Warren, of course, is completely lost. He's our neophyte figure for this world of Asian mysticism. So he's asking all the readers questions that get answers from the other characters in terms of what on earth is going on. Why would someone want to stop us from helping Psylocke, he asks. And Doctor Strange says it goes much deeper than that, Warren. Logan says these things don't give a rat's tail for bets. All they care about is death, ours. So they're back to back here in a circle of light, about to defend themselves from these Undercloak Shadow Ninjas. And let's see how all of that works out. Well, we get a double page spread as the ninjas attack. That's really, really cool. Really great work by Joe Madureira. Great poses. And of course, the work very much inspired by his interest in Japanese manga, most particularly Masamune Shiro's Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell, but also anime, including most particularly Ninja Scroll, a manga series that came out in 1993. And so the designs of the characters and the way that Madureira's art has developed from the original Art Adams influence, very much reconfigured in the light of his interest in manga and anime. And this particular two-parter, very much a story designed to let it rip, rather, I'll put it that way, let it rip in terms of that manga and anime influence on his art. So the title of the story, Quest for the Crimson Dawn, it's the conclusion of the Warriors of the Ebon Night two-parter. And the creative team here, Scott Lobdell and Jeph Loeb, writers. Lobdell plotting and Jeph Loeb adding the dialogue and narrative captions. Steve Buccellato and Team Boosh on color art, and Richard Starkings and Comic Craft on the digital lettering. And something else that I want to say about Joe Madureira and his manga and anime influences, it is salutary to be reminded of the fact that Joe Madureira, when he produced this particular issue, this two-parter, was 21 years old, going on 22. He was extremely young. He got his start at Marvel at the age of 18 as an intern. And in that short space of time, 3 to 4 years, he had made his way to the very top of the superhero comics penciling industry. Much in the same way that Jim Lee did some years previously, when Jim Lee, in the space of roughly 3 to 4 years, became one of Marvel's top pencilers and ultimately selling the 8 million copies of X-Men #1. But Madureira, what he reminds me of is he reminds me of a young Frank Miller. Frank Miller, when he got a start, a guy in his early 20s, and he got his hands on Japanese manga, some of the first manga to be read by American readers. Lone Wolf and Cub in particular, he got his hands on early copies of Lone Wolf and Cub, and it very much inspired his run on Daredevil when he became his original run on Daredevil when he became the writer, in particular with his creation of the Elektra character and giving her that background with the hand ninjas and Asian mysticism involved with the hand ninjas as well. And then, of course, his limited series with Chris Claremont on Wolverine, also set in Japan, and most particularly Ronin, his first creator-owned series for DC Comics. So Miller, a young, ambitious, hungry, talented artist in his early 20s, influenced by kind of the first wave of Japanese manga, Akira, but most particularly Lone Wolf and Cub. And here again, it's happening over a decade later with Joe Madureira, influenced by Masamune Shirow and Ninja Scroll, and bringing that into the American superhero comics industry. So really intriguing that. And something else, the last thing I'll say before I move on beyond this beautiful double page spread, is it's always the young prodigy artists who are so hungry for influence and who synthesize and bring into their art those new influences that inject fresh energy into the comics and the superhero industry for everyone, for all artists and all creators. Frank Miller did it, Jim Lee did it, but not with a Japanese influence, with other influences. And here we have Madureira doing it in the mid-90s. So yeah, and now back to the story. So we have a nice fight sequence here of everyone up against those undercloaks. Gomar here running to the entranceway to the Netherworld. So he conjures the Netherworld, "Come, Sister Earth, smile upon your little brother." And actually what he's doing here is he is evoking a mystical aid from the Earth to rid them of these undercloaked ninjas, but it will also prove to be the entrance to the Netherworld as well. And so a nice page there, and very much all the creative team working really well together, penciling, inking, the digital coloring, and the digital lettering too. It all looks incredibly well cohered on the page. And then the scene switches to the X-Mansion, and Psylocke, who's recovering. She's not recovering, she's actually dying from the injuries she sustained in that fight with Sabretooth a couple of issues earlier. And who is this that's watching over her in her unconscious state, except for Gambit? And in recent issues of both X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, there has been a return to the X-Trader plot that had been in abeyance for a long time, and there is a finger of suspicion pointing towards Gambit as potentially the X-Trader. And some issues previously, Psylocke, when Gambit was lying in the hospital bed in the X-Mansion, after his kiss with Rogue in the Israeli desert left him comatose for a period, she went into his head telepathically, and he's wondering whether she discovered his secret. And he says here aloud, "Telepathically probing my mind without asking, looking to learn something I don't want nobody to know, ever." So he looks quite menacing there, and the reader would be wondering whether he's going to do something nefarious while Psylocke is unconscious or not. But and we get that real close up there on his red eye, and it really does look menacing indeed. Also him there in deep shadow as well with those red eyes glowing. But the narrative captions make plain questions to be asked at another time, perhaps, as Elizabeth Braddock's body reacts to the worst of her massive injuries. For a fraction of an instant, Remy LeBeau realizes that her death would ensure his secrets remain his own, but the thought fades quickly and he acts instinctively. So he calls for the Beast to get to MedLab, intensive care unit, immediately, and then he gives Psylocke mouth to mouth and tries to restart her heart there as well. So meanwhile, in the Netherworld, they made their way into it via the mouth of the paper dragon from earlier. That's what I was talking about earlier. And now they're making their way upwards, and this is a very kind of interesting like fantasy space that they're in, but this is supposed to be under Midtown Manhattan, or Lower East Side Manhattan. And Warren, who is, as I said earlier, our naive neophyte figure, always asking the questions, whereby we'll get the explanations as readers. So he says, we stepped into the mouth of the paper dragon and found ourselves here, but I thought you said the Ebon vein was in the heart of the city. So Logan says, the kid is right, Gomer. If the elixir we need is at the city centre, why are we going in this direction? And Gomer's response is, think, Logan, like you used to when you were a samurai way back when, all the way back to the miniseries, the Chris Claremont and Frank Miller miniseries. So that's a nice callback to Miller, like one of the first American artists to bring that Japanese manga influence to the American style and comics. Sometimes you have to go in order to get out, exit in order to enter, go up to head down. So this is all very Zen, mystic phraseology. It's very much of the nature of Zen, that it's by contradictions that one achieves a Zen state. So that's what's going on here in order to get to this Ebon vein. Meanwhile, Archangel is suffering here from injuries he sustained trying to track down and apprehend Sabretooth. And Doctor Strange here is concerned that Archangel is in that injured state, and he starts giving out to Logan. He says here, I was a doctor long before I was a sorcerer, Logan. I cannot be a party to this young man's death. Logan all the while is very hard-headed about the whole situation. Then leave, he says. If I do, you can be certain I'll take him with me. Anything less on my part would be tantamount to murder. But Archangel himself says, no, please, my life hasn't been worth much since losing my wings, becoming Apocalypse's angel of death, and getting these techno-organic wings in their place, way back in X Factor 24. It wasn't until Betsy that I've actually been happy, he says. I'm pretty sure that I love her. Please, Doc, you have to help me help her. So it will be most important that someone who truly does love Psylocke be there at the climax of their quest. And someone else off panel says, I quite agree with the soul infants. That's an interesting phrasing. What a gargantuan waste of time to have sallied forth this far into the heart of the city for less than naught. So it's the mystical heart of the city, less than naught. So who's this now? It's someone we got a glimpse of in shadow in the previous issue, but now we're going to see him for the first time, and Gomer will make the introduction. By the way, an interesting artistic choice here to have all the characters in shadow except for little details of their faces like eyes and teeth, and also details of Doctor Strange's costume there as well. So an interesting artistic choice that. And here we go. Meet Tar Proctor of the Crimson Dawn. So this is a guy that we saw in shadow in the previous issue, and he was the one who was commanding these little neon what are they? Little neon creatures. They're like animated Japanese pictograms, and there they are, just kind of gambling around on his wrist. I like that little detail. And he says, I know who they are and what they want. I've known since before you stepped foot beneath the city. Your friend is dying. She needs to sip of the Crimson Dawn, and that means you need me. Now, as I said here, Logan, he's not in the most patient frame of mind, because around this point in Marvel continuity, he's becoming more and more feral, more and more bestial. He's going backwards in terms of his former development into a more steady type person. He's becoming more feral since he lost the adamantium. He's aware of it too. So now he's acting much more instinctively and aggressively in the comics and in this story too. So he pops his claws once more. That's a nice image of him, 3/4 profile. And what will the result of this be? Well, Gomer steps in and says to Wolverine, there's a proper etiquette to all of this. So he clears his throat and he says, Almighty Proctor Tar, we worthless creatures of mud and bone, petition your ancient generosity for a boon, a single cup of the life essence which flows through the earth. So that is the Crimson Dawn of the Ebon vein. It's life essence which flows through the earth. So Tar ponders the petition, how positively sincere. What to do, I guess I could help, but why bother? And then with a gesture, he seems to destroy Tar. That's what Warren thinks anyway. And then he says, I found it tiresome over the years, people only visiting when they want something. It's not as if I don't have feelings of my own. For instance, at this moment, I'd like to see my neon minions scale the all too soft flesh from your bones. And it looks like there's thousands of them there in the background with the digital coloring effects. And then I like this line. This is a good line from Wolverine. He says, you're way too touchy for this gig, but that is funny. So Jeph Loeb gets some praise for that one. Then back at the mansion, it looks like Betsy's heart stopped. So the Beast is trying to restart it there. He's got an adrenaline shot that he's about to administer to. And meanwhile, and this is kind of laying it on too thick in my opinion, Gambit there is still wondering whether he wants her to live or die. Part of me hopes you succeed, Hank. And the other part, it's just a bit much. We already went through that earlier, is my feeling about it. But then we're back in the nether place, the heart of the city. So Wolverine ferociously slashing those neon minions of Tar. And that kind of shocks the guy. He says, and you call me unstable? But meanwhile, here's the Crimson Dawn. And so, Warren needed Doctor Strange there to be his guide in respect of what to do. So while Logan is keeping those neon minions at bay, Doctor Strange tells Warren, gaze upon the reflection of the quote-unquote real world. Even as we speak, Elizabeth Braddock's soul seeks to slip forever away from her earthly vessel. So it looks like the Beast is about to cover her up, that she's dead. And Warren, of course, is shocked. What do we do? He asks. Among other things, we pray, says Doctor Strange. And then he puts his hand, he's in his astral form, remember, not physical form, into Warren's chest, that there is as much love and hope in your heart for the woman as you claim. So this really is a test, is his love for Psylocke true? If it's true love, then it will be effective. And this is intriguing. So what Doctor Strange pulls from Warren's chest, this is all astral mystical stuff, is a golden statuette of Psylocke that is her soul, the part of herself she has trusted to you. So interesting, symbolic. So Warren thinks it's beautiful. Doctor Strange says it always is. And Tar there is aghast. You've won nothing, Strange. Without her here to sip of the Crimson Dawn, the mystic life's blood of the earth is useless to her, he says. So be it, says Strange. Where magic fails, let love prevail. And he puts the statuette, which is representative or symbolic of her soul, into the Crimson Dawn. And then back at Xavier's, there's a result. By the way, this is a really nice establishing shot of the X-Mansion at night. And I like the digital coloring there of the night sky as well, and the lights on in the X-Mansion. It's a beautiful panel just in and of itself, a little small detail. So there's a result back at the X-Mansion in the ICU unit. Psylocke is revived, her eye opens, her heart is restarted. The Beast says her vital signs are stabilizing. So the professor puts it together. It's just a guess on my part, Remy. But what I think it means is, when we get past these advertisements, is that Wolverine and Archangel accomplished what they set out to do. And there we go. That's the last page. But actually, I just missed one little detail there. And it is this. Gambit asks, what is that mark on her? What does it mean? So there's some mark on her, but we don't see it in the artwork in this particular issue. It'll be in future issues that we'll see it on the other side of her face. And so they're back now in Gomer's warehouse, and the adventure is over. And Warren asks Doctor Strange, so tell me, is Betsy going to be all right? She lives, yes, he says, and that's cryptic. Great. And then Gomer arrives back too, so he wasn't killed. And then Doctor Strange thinks, he doesn't say anything more than she lives to Warren's question, is she going to be all right? And he continues thinking here at the end, why can I not shake the feeling that despite our apparent victory, the war between light and darkness, the battle for the very soul of the X-Man known as Psylocke, has only just begun. So there we go. So it's a kind of cryptic ending, and there's a little mystery there in terms of what exactly is the mark on Betsy, and we're going to have to come back for subsequent issues in order to see what that is. So the letters page here, we've got some letters regarding Uncanny X-Men 327, and that was the spotlight issue on Magneto. That was drawn by Roger Cruz, but I think Luke Ross was involved also. And so there's some interesting letters here. I'll just pick out a couple of the key points here. So this letter writer says, I believe that Joe Madureira and Roger are the top artists working in this field today. Well, certainly Madureira was. And then another one here where, wait until I find it. Oh yeah. So this particular letter writer says, having talented people like Scott Lobdell, Roger Cruz, and in brackets, the best artist at Marvel. Wow. Okay. Roger Cruz draws the best Magneto I've seen in a long time, and the classic Jim Magneto is tough to beat. So I don't know that I agree with that. Roger Cruz was doing his best, but he wasn't, by any stretch of the imagination, the best artist at Marvel in the mid-90s. No way, in my opinion. And up here we've got a reader's piece of art, like a drawing of Magneto. David Stewart. It'd be interesting to know how old the reader was for that piece of art. It's not too bad. And next up, Iceman finally confronts the White Queen about the time she assumed control of his mind and body, and this time he's not going to accept the cold shoulder as an answer. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 330, Part 2 of the Quest for the Crimson Dawn. Let me know your thoughts about the issue itself and the two-parter in the comment section. And if you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.